There weren't many people on the bus at the time. Rush hour had already passed, so the bus was half empty. People on the bus were glad to be in the warmth and comfort of the big vehicle. Winters in Maine are often harsh, and that one was no exception. A strong wind kept blowing all day long. It seemed to get under the clothes, throwing snow and ice chips in everyone's faces. Getting stuck on the streets in such weather was horrible, so everyone tried to get to their destination as soon as possible to wait out the bad weather in safety. Despite the fact that there were a few passengers on the bus, the ticket inspector was very vigilant, making sure that no one took the bus without paying the fare. It was the last bus on the route for the day, and so the driver and the inspector were both very tired. At that moment, a boy of about 8 years old with a school bag over his shoulder got on the bus at one of the stops. He took off his glove, reached into his pocket, and was horrified to realize that he had almost no money. There was a hole in the boy's jacket, which was probably how he lost all the coins. The boy's name was Kevin, and if it weren't for the bad weather, he would have certainly just walked home. Looking warily at the inspector, the boy tried to walk past her and take a seat in the back. Kevin had never felt so ashamed in his life, but he simply had no other choice. The boy hoped that the inspector wouldn't notice him, and if she did, she wouldn't force him off the bus. Oh, if only Kevin knew how wrong he was. Samantha Edwards had been working as an inspector for several years, and therefore she quickly identified anyone trying to get a free ride. Frankly speaking, she could have forgiven Kevin and chosen not to make a fuss about the fact that the boy didn't pay the fare. But Samantha was in a very bad mood that day, and therefore she'd been taking her anger out on all the passengers all day long. Seeing the exhaustion of shame on the boy's face, she immediately realized that he didn't have a ticket. "Hey, little boy, where do you think you're going?" Samantha called out the little passenger. Kevin shuddered and turned around slowly. The inspector loomed over him like a grizzly bear cornering its defenseless prey. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't have enough money to pay. Here, can I give you everything I have?" The kid said quietly and handed the woman a handful of change. Samantha's face turned purple and her lips merged into one thin line from the anger she was feeling. "Is this a joke, kid? If you can't pay the fare, get off the bus," the inspector exclaimed. Kevin was desperate. Given the weather, getting off the bus before his stop would make getting home incredibly hard for the boy. But there was no stopping the ticket inspector. In a fit of rage, she pointed Kevin to the door, knowing full well that the next stop was coming. "But this is the last bus. Can't you just let it slide? Just this one time, please. My mom's sick. She'll be worried. And she can't worry because she has heart problems," the boy pleaded. But it felt like a moment of triumph to Samantha. You all always have some made-up excuses. Working a job with no prospects or career opportunities, all the woman could do was assert herself at the expense of others, and an 8-year-old boy was perfect for it. Samantha knew that she could get away with pretty much anything because she had done it countless times before and never once getting punished for it. The worst part was that none of the passengers stood up for the boy or stepped in to pay his fare. In less than a minute, the bus came to a halt at the next stop. "Get out," Samantha snarled, thereby making it clear that the conversation was over. There were tears in Kevin's eyes, but he had no choice but to get off the bus. He threw a hood over his head, straightened his backpack, and left the warmth of the bus. It was already getting dark, and the temperature had dropped a degree or two. The wind was even getting stronger now, which made it seem as if Maine had turned into a realm of eternal winter and cold. Kevin was simply too tired and cold to go anywhere. That was why he decided to sit down right there at the bus stop. The situation was critical, and Kevin understood it all too well. However, what the boy was most worried about was his mother. In addition to her heart condition, she'd also caught a cold recently and was running a fever. Kevin knew that no one would help him. Because of the bad weather, there weren't really any cars on the road. Immersed in his sad thoughts, the boy didn't notice an old, frail man who sat down on the edge of the bench beside him. The stranger sat quietly for a while, after which he was the first one to break the silence. "What are you thinking about, kid? It's getting late and cold. Isn't it time for you to get home?" Kevin looked in surprise at the elderly man, who seemed to have stepped out of some fairy tale. He was short, with a bushy beard and a small, well-groomed mustache. "I'd love to go home, but I'm just too tired, and the ticket inspector threw me off the bus because I lost my money and couldn't pay the fare," Kevin answered with a sob. The stranger thought for a moment and then got up from the bench and said, "You know what, kid? Let's go to my place. I live nearby. You'll warm up, have dinner, and then we'll figure out what to do next. My name is Henry Miller, by the way." The old man's offer made Kevin incredibly happy. The boy extended his hand for a handshake as a sign of consent and friendship, after which he introduced himself and got up from the bench. The wind was howling like a wolf caught in a trap, whipping clouds of snow into the faces of the tired travelers. Mr. Miller stepped in front of Kevin to shield the boy from the blizzard with his own body. Luckily, it didn't take long to get to the old man's place. Soon, Kevin was already sitting by the burning fireplace, next to a huge fluffy cat named Buster. Meanwhile, Henry Miller was putting together a simple dinner. The man couldn't help but thank the higher powers for pushing him to go to the store to get pet food that night. After all, if it weren't for this seemingly insignificant chore, Henry Miller might not yet have met the boy who found himself in such a difficult life situation. Before letting Kevin have dinner, the old man asked him to call his mother. "She must be worried. It's getting late. I think it would be best for you to spend the night here, and then I'll get you a taxi and send you home in the morning," Mr. Miller suggested. Kevin ran to the phone in the living room and dialed his mother's number. Rachel Foster was beside herself with worry, thinking of all the things that could have happened to her little boy. She was so mad at herself for letting Kevin go to school that day. But the weather was much better that morning, so the woman had no way of knowing that it would get so bad. It was only in the evening that the blizzard and the cold literally paralyzed life in the small town lost in the east of Maine. But when Kevin called his mother from a safe place, her joy knew no bounds. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm with Mr. Miller. It's very warm here, and he has a cat named Buster," Kevin exclaimed joyfully. "I'm happy for you, honey. Be careful and don't go outside. Now, let me speak to Mr. Miller, please," Rachel asked. The elderly man raised an eyebrow in surprise, but took the phone nevertheless. The old man listened to the story of the single mother and hastened to reassure her that her son would be fine. "Well, my little guest, it's time to go to bed," the old man said and showed the boy to his room. Mr. Miller didn't have a family, and therefore the man was very glad to have Kevin over. The boy fell asleep as soon as his head touched the pillow. Tired after the long day, Kevin slept like a baby, snoring sweetly and mumbling in his sleep. He woke up earlier than usual the next morning and exclaimed joyfully, "What a delicious smell!" A second later, the door opened slightly and Henry Miller's head appeared in the opening. "Oh, it's nothing special, kid. Just my signature beef omelet and peanut butter toast," the man explained, winking at Kevin. After they had breakfast, Mr. Miller called a cab for Kevin and sent the boy home, just as he promised. By that time, the atmospheric front had shifted to the west, and the weather in the region improved significantly. Having decided to take advantage of the lull, Henry Miller went to the bus depot, where the inspector who kicked Kevin off the bus worked. Few people knew that Mr. Miller used to be a police officer. He had solved several high-profile cases and detained at least 100 criminals. Having listened to the old man, the depot manager thought about it for a minute. It wasn't the first time he'd gotten complaints about the ticket inspector. The manager promised to sort things out and tried to calm down the old man, who promised to get the mayor himself involved in this issue if the manager failed to deal with it. After that memorable night, Kevin and Mr. Miller became true friends. With Rachel's approval, they met every weekend to spend time together, either talking by the fireplace or watching TV. Henry Miller became a sort of a father figure to Kevin. 20 years passed. During that time, Kevin Foster's life changed beyond recognition. He finished college and quickly achieved success in the business world, having firmly taken his place under the sun. Now he drove around in a private car and barely resorted to the services of public transportation. At the same time, almost no one knew that it was the late Henry Miller who helped the man reach such heights in such a short time. The old man bequeathed a large amount of money to Kevin, who became like a real grandson to him. The retired police officer had been saving money for many years, planning on donating it to someone in need. Henry knew that Rachel Foster and her son needed help, and therefore, from the minutes of their acquaintance, he knew he was going to do it. It was thanks to his money that Rachel got the treatment she needed, and it was thanks to his money that Kevin could attend one of the best universities in the country. Remembering Mr. Miller warmly, the young businessman came to his grave every week, never failing to bring him a bouquet of carnations. However, Kevin never knew if Samantha Edwards ever got punished for the way she treated him. One day, when Kevin's car was in the shop, he decided to take the bus to work. He got on the bus, paid the fare, and took a seat by the window. At that moment, a little girl of about 10 years old with pigtails with giant bows on them got on the bus. Trying to avoid eye contact with the ticket inspector, she rushed to the back of the bus. Kevin's heart sank. He couldn't shake off the feeling of déjà vu. At the same time, he heard the angry inspector scream, "Hey kid, where do you think you're going? In case you forgot, you have to pay for the fare." Kevin turned his head and met the inspector's eyes. He couldn't be sure that it was Samantha Edwards, but he couldn't be sure that it wasn't her either. "Wait a second, ma'am. There's no need to cause a scene. I'll pay the girl's fare. Just leave her alone," Kevin said, approaching the inspector. The woman hesitated for a second, then quickly looked away. She took Kevin's money and trudged to her seat, where she silently looked out the window the rest of the way. Kevin's act caused a storm of applause and cheers from the other passengers. But the young businessman didn't want that kind of fame. Before getting off at his stop, Kevin winked at the girl with pigtails and stepped off the bus. Kevin felt good about what he did and sent a mental thank you to Henry Miller for saving him so many years ago. All we can do now is rejoice at the fact that the boomerang of good always returns to the one who launched it.